Welcome to SVGTV's news for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. I'm Triska Campbell with the details. Prime Minister Dr. Afghan Saab said the criminal justice system in the region is increasingly becoming controlled by lawyers who practice criminal law. Addressing the second day of a regional symposium on violence as a public health issue, the crime challenge at the Hyatt Regency in Trinidad and Tobago on Tuesday, Prime Minister Gonsalves told the gathering that they all know that the oxygen of the legal profession is money, and accused criminal defense lawyers in the Caribbean of deliberately delaying cases and chastised the judiciary for allowing it to happen. Prime Minister Gonsalves said it was time for judges and magistrates to take back their courts.
Judges have allowed too many lawyers who practice criminal law to control the court system under the guise of protecting the rights of the accused person, who in fact is entitled constitutionally to the presumption of innocence, to a fair trial before an independent tribunal within a reasonable time. And nobody would wish to undermine any of those constitutional protections. But those constitutional protections cannot and do not mean that you must take a long time over a trial and give adjournments upon adjournments, and witnesses migrate and memories fade, and a lot of times you have to withdraw the prosecution because delay is part of the defense, and judges ought to know that. Some persons who are not lawyers and who are prime ministers may not speak the manner in which I speak, but I have to say to my brethren on the bench, they have to start control their courts again. Because the victims' families in the case of homicide do not understand and appreciate what is happening in this regard. I say that justice is not a cloistered virtue, and just as I am subject to reasonable criticism, judges themselves and magistrates must be subjected to reasonable criticism. It is not a contempt of court so to do. If we cannot shine the light of transparency as to what goes on there and reasonableness, well then a lot of what we are doing here will be rendered meaningless.
Touching on the illegal gun and drug trade across the Caribbean, Prime Minister Gonsalves said proceeds from the illicit activities are being laundered in respectable companies such as restaurants and supermarkets, and it was important to follow the money.
Across this Caribbean, people complain that you catch the smaller fry, but Mr. Big escapes, because they're linking the crime naturally, and there's much linkage between that and drugs or other kind of economic activity from the proceeds of crime. We have a lot of regulations, a lot of laws dealing with money laundering. If you make a lot of money off drugs, you import the drugs illegally. You sell the drugs. You get foreign currency. You can't change the foreign currency easily or lodge it in the banks. So it has to be cleaned somewhere else. And it is often cleansed in perfectly respectable enterprises. People who have restaurants, people who have supermarkets, people who have legitimate businesses where it is very difficult to say where this money comes from.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Gonsalves said persons who have moved towards crime must not at any time feel that society is responsible for them and they are not responsible for themselves.
It's an important point we must hammer all the time, because when we hear some commentators oh, the reason why this killing was done is because this fellow come from a poor family, come from a poor community. Well, the truth of the matter is that if you have in a country 20% poverty, how is it you don't have 20% of the population in the country in poverty? If poverty is the sole or principal causation, this narrow economistic argument, that you'll have 20% of the community being violent criminals, but you don't have that. So clearly something is missing, and what is missing is how this person, very often by choice, decide that they're going to pull the trigger and kill somebody else. It is not so much that they devalue life. And I repeat, if they devalue life and they're frustrated and they can't get on in this world, they will commit suicide rather than homicide. The fact that they commit homicide is a step which we have to grasp and we have to understand. And they have a responsibility.
Kim Gonzalez further told those at the symposium that while he may be speaking some very uncomfortable things, they are not going to address the problem of crime very serious unless they speak of uncomfortable things and take action regionally in relation to these uncomfortable matters. Meanwhile, on Boom FM this morning, lawyer Jomo Thomas said he liked the theme of the regional symposium on crime as a public health issue, noting that it was a good way of looking at crime. However, he was a bit dismayed by some of the rhetoric that came out of the two-day conference.
There was this notion that the judiciary in the Caribbean is being taken over by criminal defense lawyers. And I wondered which country this phenomena is playing out, because I can speak for St. Vincent and for Grenada, which I know pretty well and practice, and I don't see that obtained there. In neither of these countries do I get any feeling at all that the judiciary is pro-defense. In fact, if you look closely at the judiciary, the magistracy, the justices, most of them have very little criminal defense trial experience. And in the main, for the judges who would have passed through here, I would think that they all try to be very, very fair. Those who passed through and those who are still here try to be fair. But you can't help feeling sometimes that there's a poor prosecution bent. A lot of times it may not be very pronounced, but yet you can feel it.
Thomas went on to say that when it comes to criminal justice, there is a crisis in the Caribbean society, and that it may well be that many of the leaders want to pass the buck.
In Jamaica, in Trinidad, in St. Vincent, we have really, really high homicide rates. The Caribbean rank among some of the highest in the world. So there's that strain, there's that pressure. And I remember in following that conference, I saw the serious cost. Prime Minister Rowley out of Trinidad was costing. What does it take to correct an injury, a gunshot injury to the head? What does it take to correct a gunshot injury to the chest, to the leg, and so on? And much of this run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're not there talking about the strain on the emergency staff. We're not They're talking about the strain on blood banks and so on and so forth. But this is a real serious issue that our leaders have to address. But to put that crisis at the feet of others, and I'm not sure the difficulty should be put at the feet of the politicians either, but to put the crisis at the and to try to pass the buck and say that criminal defense attorneys seem to be gaining control, I'm not sure that can be borne out by the fact.
On the issue of the return to the death penalty, Thomas said he commends Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General Douglas Mendez, who noted that there is no empirical evidence to show that the death penalty is a deterrent for homicides. On the hearing in the High Court here yesterday on the application by the government's legal team for a stay of execution on the judgment handed down last month by Justice Esco Henry in the vaccine mandate case, which came back in favor of the public sector unions, Thomas said the matter was heard by a single judge of the Court of Appeal and they await a decision.
As I said, if the stay if the stay is granted, the question then becomes to push for the expeditious prosecution of the appeal. Hopefully we can have it done in July when the court comes here. The court comes on the week of the 14th. And we see where that goes.
Absolutely.
I know that as one of the attorneys and as part of a team of attorneys on that matter, we are hoping that the court does not grant the stay so that the government can proceed to make arrangements to pay the workers and let the matter be heard in December, because as I said yesterday, the government has a high mountain to climb. Have the substantive appeal overturned, and that mountain is higher than Soufriere.
Thomas said once the court does not order a stay of the judgment, the government has an obligation to pay the salaries to the affected workers, which have not been paid for months.
Because remember, the workers have until July, I think it's June 24th, to come up with whatever damages they may have suffered. So for example, if the court says that they were improperly removed from their jobs, they were not getting salaries, they couldn't pay their mortgage, they couldn't pay their insurance, they couldn't do certain things. Because they are unable to do that, they may have gone into default. There's a huge interest back up now for a year or more. The government would be responsible for paying all of that.
Yes.
To bring them back to a place where they were before the government improperly, unlawfully removed them from their jobs. So those are the kind of things that the government would have to do once it does not get a stay. If it does get the stay and then the substantive appeal is heard and Justice Henry's decision is upheld as we expect it would be, then the government would still have to make all of those payments.
Okay.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines is hosting Dr. Beatriz Gutierrez Muller, the wife of Mexican President, on a one-day visit. Dr. Muller and her delegation were greeted at the Argyle International Airport by a number of government officials, including Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves and other members of his cabinet. At a ceremony at the National Library, Dr. Muller handed over a special piece of equipment to the government of SVG from the government of Mexico for the digitization of the National Archives here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The ceremony also involved the signing of a letter of intent to signal cooperation between the United Mexican State and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Addressing the ceremony, Executive Director of the Mexican Agency for International Development and Cooperation, Dr. Laura Elena Crulilo Culbia, noted that it is her third visit to SVG. However, the first past the Argyle International Airport. She said in 2021, during the COVID-19 pandemic, they brought ventilators to SVG. In our 2022, they brought a donation of COVID-19 vaccines from Mexico. Dr. Colbia said today is a historic occasion as it is the first time that such a high-ranking Mexican official is visiting St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
She's the special envoy from our president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And let me tell you something. Our president always says, when someone has to be abroad representing me in a matter of something protocol or administrative, he would send something from the cabinet. But when he wants to be represented abroad with friends, with countries that he cares dearly for, then he sends Dr. Beatriz Gutierrez Mueller. So that's why she is here. This is a relevant commission. This is part of the project that she graciously endorses in Mexico, and this is the project of recovery of historical archives in Latin America and the Caribbean. She personally is delivering this because she's teaching us, at least in Mexico, and she's trying to do this all over Latin America and the Caribbean, that we should cherish our past. We should cherish our national treasures, and especially we need to cherish our regional identity. It makes us stronger. And one way to make it very real and concrete is the bringing of this scanner that's right there. It's not just a printer, it's not just a copier. It's a very special piece of equipment that helps us preserve our historical documents, small, big, very old, not too old, but in a way that we can have the electronic versions very fast and very easy to keep and to move around.
SVG's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Kisa Peters, welcomed Dr. Beatriz Gutierrez Mueller and her delegation to SVG, noting that since the establishment of diplomatic relations with the United Mexican States on July 31st, 1990, both countries have shared cordial and productive relations and have collaboration on national and regional levels.
There are many examples that show what trust between states can achieve and how important and necessary cooperation is. Mexico has in good faith opened its shores to over 50 Vincentian students between 2005 and 2011, who were the recipients of undergraduate and postgraduate degree scholarships to study in Mexico as part of the special fellowships for Anglophone Caribbean countries. The government of Mexico also aided in the rehabilitation of houses which were destroyed in the aftermath of the December 2013 floods in the form of a grant contribution of US $500,000 for the rehabilitation of homes which were destroyed. And in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2022, Mexico donated 10,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine and 2 ventilators to the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it was in that meeting I met my good friend, Dr. Cubias, who represented the United Mexican States and Amexid. And I made the point at that handing over ceremony that the ventilators that were donated to St. Vincent and the Grenadines were specially customed for our specifications in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I said, if that's not love, then I don't know what is. These are just a few of the many expressions of support and partnership that we as a people have experienced through our cooperation with the United Mexican States.
Peters said the state-of-the-art equipment, the aerial scanner brought in by the Mexican delegation, will allow for gentle scanning of valuable, fragile books and will greatly aid in the archiving, conservation, protection, and preservation of the library's documentary collection and archival records so that they are able to be usable to Vincentians for generations to come, which will ensure cultural continuity and national identity, maintaining our unique culture heritage for further generations.
The government of Mexico has further indicated that technical training for the maximization of skills and knowledge for the operation of the scanner is available to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and for that we are grateful. This meaningful contribution further solidifies our bond with Mexico and shows commitment on their part to our nation building. We therefore look forward to deepened cooperation with Mexico, and our hope is that we will grow in the advancement of our shared interests and mutual support.
The Special Mexican Envoy, Dr. Beatriz, expressed gratitude to the government and people of SVG for the warm welcome and the National Library for accepting the special piece of equipment.
Tipo de instrumentos como una caja digitalizadora es útil.
Mexico has gone a long way in saving their history, and we have used equipment such as this to get our historic background again, and we are very happy to be here in St. Vincent to share our experiences and also to donate and to help you to get back your rich history.
Y dirán, ¿qué relación tiene una digitalizadora con la gran historia de México?
What do you have? A scanner with a grand history of Mexico.
La cuestión es que en un mundo digitalizado como el nuestro, el que nos toca vivir, en esos aparatos es posible hacer el registro de los objetos o documentos de nuestros países por cualquier eventualidad y después de ello poderlos compartir al mundo.
In a digitalized world as we live in presently, you could use this equipment so you could get your information and also to keep it and to share it with the world.
At this time, the wife of the Mexican president and her delegation are attending a cocktail reception at La View Hotel. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade said it has noted an upsurge in issues faced by local Vincentians when conducting business with vehicle dealerships from Japan. In an effort to mitigate against such issues, the ministry is advising the public that the Japanese Motor Vehicle Exporters Association, JUMVEA, has been verified as a legitimate second-hand vehicle dealership by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Japan. The ministry further advised individuals and organizations wishing to conduct business with vehicle dealerships from Japan to do so via the JUMVEA website, www.jumvea.or.jp, to avoid any inconveniences. In other news now, the Ministry of Agriculture is working on different initiatives to assist farmers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines who are being affected by the extremely dry period which started about a month ago. This is according to Minister of Agriculture, Sebota Caesar, who on NBC Radio's face-to-face program this morning said coming from a conservation with technicians from the National Emergency Management Organization, the dry period may persist for another month.
The vagaries of climate change, they are all well known to us. And the farmers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the last 5, 6, 7 years, we have been experiencing from time to time extremely dry conditions around this time of the year. The livestock farmers, starting from tomorrow, will be receiving assistance from the Ministry of Agriculture, where our jeeps will be coming around to the different farmers to assist in taking water to the animals. We are also going to do some cut and carry because, for example, there are some areas where there's a total depletion of the grass, and we have to ensure that we maintain the national herd and that we assist these farmers in providing the requisite food needed for these animals to be sustained.
Minister Caesar said assisting farmers with livestock is one of the ministry's priorities during this dry period, noting that there was a great loss of livestock in the red zone due to the eruptions of La Soufrière volcano in April 2021.
We have to take everything into consideration that we lost a large percentage of our livestock in the red zone when we had the volcanic eruptions, La Soufrière.
Yes.
Some perished, but some farmers also chose to sell quickly for export, because we're all aware what happened when we experienced the heavy ash cover that destroyed a lot of the pasture area. So we have a list of farmers who we usually work with. And if there are farmers who were listening to the program this morning, you may have a neighbor, a friend, a church member, former classmate, you listen to the program, you know that the person is into livestock production. I want you to get in contact with that person so that they can speak to the technicians at the nearest agriculture station. I know that the vets are doing a lot of hard work, and they are aware of the names. So just in case there's anyone who slips through, who was a bit unnoticed, we want to ensure that we assist everyone, because we are an exporter of livestock from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Quite recently, we exported cattle. We are constantly exporting pigs to Grenada.
A town hall meeting to commemorate the second anniversary of the explosive eruptions of La Soufrière volcano in April of 2021 was held yesterday at the Barley Learning Resource Center. Commending and thanking persons in the Barley and surrounding communities for their work during the eruptions was Deputy Director of NEMO, Kenson Stoddard, who said that the experiences during the disaster are extremely valuable in helping to deal with the disaster management, especially volcanic emergencies.
These in Barley and other communities accommodated those persons in the north, and I really want to say a heartfelt thank you to those persons who opened their doors. And for those persons who came and walked day and night at the shelters. I don't think the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines could say thank you enough, and we cannot pay you for the work that you have done. One of the things that I don't like to say, but one of the things that we know to be true, is that the volcano will erupt again. It may not be in our time, it might be our children. I see some young persons, one or two here with us today. They are the ones who have to carry on this message. They have to give their experiences. What happened, what to expect, how do we prepare for a shelter, all of that information, all of that good stuff, all of the communication that you had between Dr. Ritchie and Professor Ritchie and the Prime Minister and those early morning shows, the information that came from Dr. Christopher and his team, all of that we have to remember. We have to document it. We will need to document your experiences as well, because your experiences are extremely valuable to how we move forward as it relates to disaster management, especially for volcanic emergency.
President of the SVG Red Cross Society, Alston Anderson, noted that during the April 2021 volcanic eruption, the Barley Red Cross Group was put in charge of the activities in the Barley area, and it has done a good job.
Not too long ago, on this same spot, in the same place, we had a meeting that was coordinated by NEMO. It gave us an update of the satellite warehouse condition and also the emergency shelter that is under construction where the old secondary school was situated. And we would have heard that they are hoping to give the Red Cross, the Barley Red Cross, which is an affiliate of the National Red Cross Group, the mandate to run the shelter and the warehouse, and we are ready for that. we would have had the actual eruption in 2021. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines worked very hard. More so in Barry, as you would have heard from Ms. Peters, we would have managed shelter in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, because the Ministry of Education is responsible for all the emergency shelters in St. Vincent. And together with NEMO and the Red Cross and Ministry of Education, a great job.
Anderson further outlined concerns which he said residents have about the volcano, particularly whether or not it is still active.
We are hearing talks from time to time and from place to place that the Lassofer is smoking. And when rain falls, it is smoking worse. And a lot of big stone is still in the Lassofer, ready to be blown out. And there is no water. And this is causing uncertainty and unrest. So that's why NEMO is here with our volcanologists to tell us what is happening at the volcano and to help put our heart at ease, because many people are concerned. So at this moment, I want us, when the time comes, to give our undivided attention.
In other news, the Windward Island Lotteries Inc. Winlot has donated $20,000 to assist with alleviating some of the costs incurred by the World Pediatric Project in efforts to effectively fulfill its commitment made to local and regional families providing critical and sometimes urgent pediatric health care. A news release said the donation is double the amount that was previously donated to the WPP, which actively is working toward increasing the overall capacity and assessing more children in less time. Winlot Inc., represented by Executive Director Alison Thomas, and WPP, represented by Executive Director for the Caribbean Lauren McIntosh Shallow, had a short handing over last Thursday, April 13, 2022. McIntosh Shallow said they are immensely grateful to have the continued support of Winlot Inc., as their aim is to heal more children in SVG and within the region, noting that the donation to the WPP by Winlot will impact and transform the quality of life of youth across the Windward Islands.